People say blood is thicker than water, but they never mentioned credit limits. I sat at my parents' 30th anniversary dinner as they announced a family trip to Europe without me. My father laughed, claiming I belonged at home earning money. They forgot the platinum card funding their luxury was in my name. A week later, when a notification for $15,000 popped up, I did not call. I simply pressed the button to report it stolen. My name is Hope Lamberton, and I had just spent 12 hours putting out logistical fires at Vertex Horizon, a global shipping conglomerate where mistakes cost millions and apologies were a currency nobody accepted. My heels clicked against the marble floor of the Golden Heron, a sound that usually projected authority but tonight just felt heavy. I was carrying a gift bag that weighed less than a pound but had cost me $2,000. A silver photo frame from Tiffany's intended to hold a memory of my parents' 30 years of marriage. The hostess looked me up and down, her eyes lingering on my slightly rumpled blazer and the dark circles I had tried to conceal with concealer in the rearview mirror of my sedan. I did not belong in this gilded cage of velvet ropes and crystal chandeliers. I belonged in a warehouse or a boardroom, places where utility mattered more than appearance. "I am here for the Lamberton party," I said, my voice raspier than I would have liked. She led me through the dining room, past tables of Chicago's elite, to a private alcove near the back. I could hear them before I saw them. My father, Arthur Lamberton, was booming with laughter, a sound that projected a wealth he had not possessed in a decade. My mother, Beverly, was likely directing the lighting for a photograph. When I rounded the corner, the tableau was exactly as I expected. Arthur was wearing a tuxedo that was slightly too tight around the midsection, swirling a glass of scotch that cost $50 a pour. Beverly was draped in a sequined gown that shimmered under the ambient light, her phone held high as she live-streamed the appetizer course. My younger sister, Madison, was extending her left hand to a bored-looking aunt, flashing an engagement ring that looked suspiciously large for a freelance yoga instructor's fiancé to afford. And then there was Cole, my 25-year-old brother, leaning back in his chair with the arrogance of a tech mogul, despite having never held a job for longer than 3 months. "Hope you made it," my father bellowed, though he did not stand up to greet me. He gestured vaguely to an empty chair at the far end of the table, near a drafty window. "We were just telling Uncle Jerry about Cole's new venture. It is going to revolutionize crypto farming," Cole said, his mouth half full of calamari. "I just need a little seed capital to get the servers running." I sat down, placing the blue Tiffany bag on the white tablecloth. No one asked how my day was. No one asked why I was late. The waiter appeared instantly, hovering over my shoulder not to take my order, but to whisper that the bottle of vintage champagne my father had ordered required a pre-authorization on a credit card. I handed him my platinum card without looking up. It was a reflex. I was not the guest of honor. I was the wallet. For the next hour, I picked at a cold lobster bisque while the conversation swirled around me. They talked about summer homes they did not own and investments they had not made. Madison complained that her wedding planner was trying to restrict the guest list to 200 people. Beverly lamented that her followers on social media were demanding more lifestyle content. I sat in silence, calculating. The dinner would cost roughly $4,000. The suit my father was wearing was likely charged to the emergency card I gave him for his blood pressure medication. The ring on Madison's finger probably had a down payment that came from the tuition transfer I sent last month. Then, the clinking of a spoon against glass cut through the noise. Beverly stood up, her face flushed with wine and the thrill of attention. She smoothed her dress and looked around the table, her eyes skipping over me as if I were a piece of furniture. "Family, friends," she began, her voice trembling with theatrical emotion. 30 years with Arthur have been a blessing, and to celebrate this milestone, we wanted to do something special, something that celebrates us as a unit." She paused for dramatic effect. "Arthur and I have decided to book the Lamberton anniversary trip." The table erupted in applause. My heart lifted slightly. I had been working without a vacation for 3 years. The idea of escaping the Chicago frost, of turning off my work phone, of actually being included in a family memory, felt like water in a desert. We are going to Italy. Beverly squealed. 2 weeks in Tuscany, private villas, wine tasting, a complete restoration of the soul. That sounds amazing, I said, my voice cutting through the applause. I leaned forward, a genuine smile forming for the first time that night. I have some accrued leave I need to burn before the fiscal year ends. When are we flying out? I can coordinate the flights if you haven't booked them yet. I can probably get us an upgrade through my corporate account. The table went silent. It was not a natural lull in conversation. It was a suffocating, sudden vacuum of sound. Madison looked at her plate. Cole took a sudden interest in his fingernails. Beverly froze, her smile twitching at the corners. My father cleared his throat. He looked at me with a mixture of pity and annoyance, the way one looks at a dog that has jumped onto a clean sofa. Hope, Arthur said, his voice dropping an octave, adopting that paternalistic tone he used when he was about to ask for money. Only this time, the request was for my absence. Let's be reasonable. Reasonable? I asked, the smile faltering. This trip, it is for the family, he said, gesturing to the others. The real family dynamic. You know how you get. Sweetheart, you are always on your phone with work. You are always checking emails. You are too practical. I can leave the phone at home, I said, though a cold dread was starting to pool in my stomach. It is not just the phone, Beverly chimed in, her voice sharp. You just don't fit the vibe. Hope, we want to relax. We want to laugh and drink wine and not worry about logistics or schedules or reality. Whenever you are around, you bring this heaviness. You are better suited for holding down the fort here. Holding down the fort, I repeated. Someone has to work, Cole snickered, earning a nudge from Madison. I mean, you love working, right? That is your thing. Exactly, Arthur said, relieved that the Band-Aid had been ripped off. You are the provider. Hope, that is your role. You are good at it. You stay here. Keep the money coming in. And we go represent the Lamberton name in Europe. It is a division of labor. Besides, you would hate it. Too much relaxation. He raised his glass. To the Lamberton anniversary trip. Without the wet blanket. They laughed. It was not a nervous chuckle. It was a genuine, raucous release of tension. They laughed at the absurdity of me thinking I was one of them. They laughed because they truly believed that my purpose on this earth was to facilitate their joy while partaking in none of it. I looked at them. I looked at the wrinkles around my father's eyes that I had paid to have treated. I looked at the dress my mother wore, bought with the bonus check I earned by missing my own birthday. I did not scream. I did not flip the table. Something inside me, a tether that had held taut for 29 years, simply snapped. It was a quiet snap, inaudible to everyone but me. The emotional connection I had been desperately feeding with cash and loyalty died right there between the appetizer and the entree. I stood up slowly. You are right, I said. My voice was steady, void of any inflection. I would hate it. I am much too practical for Tuscany. See? She gets it, Arthur beamed, reaching for the wine bottle. Sit down. Hope, have some risotto. I have to go, I said. I have to work early in the morning. Someone has to make the money, as you said. I picked up the Tiffany bag. For a second, I considered taking it with me. Instead, I placed it gently in the center of the table, right next to the bread basket. Happy anniversary, I said. I turned and walked away. I could feel their eyes on my back, but I did not turn around. I did not look at the waiter who held the credit card machine. I just walked out into the biting Chicago wind. The valet brought my car around. I tipped him $20 and slid into the driver's seat. The heater blasted warm air against my frozen fingers, but the chill was internal. I drove onto Lakeshore Drive, the city lights blurring into streaks of gold and red. I did not cry. Crying was for people who had lost something, I realized, with a clarity that was almost terrifying. That I had not lost anything tonight. I had simply seen the ledger for what it was. I began to do the math in my head. Mortgage payments for the house they lived in $3,500 a month. Car leases for Arthur and Beverly, $1,200 a month. Cole's rent and allowance, $2,000 a month. Madison's wedding deposits, $10,000 so far. Credit card bills I paid off just this once, every single month, average of $5,000. I had spent 5 years lighting myself on fire to keep them warm, and they had just complained that the smoke was bothering their eyes. I pulled into the parking garage of my apartment complex. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. I looked down at the screen. It was a text from Beverly. "Don't be childish and storm off like that. It ruins the mood. Also, remember to transfer the rent money for Cole before we leave. He needs to buy some new clothes for the trip. Love you." I stared at the words, "Love you," a transactional footer at the end of an invoice. I turned off the car engine. I sat in the dark silence of the garage for a long time. They thought I was the logistics girl. They thought I was the practical one. They were right, and practically speaking, funding a liability was bad business. I picked up my phone, but I did not open the banking app to transfer the rent. I opened my calendar. I looked at the date. Then I unlocked my apartment door, walked inside, and for the first time in my life, I did not reply. Sleep was a luxury I could not afford, and frankly, I no longer desired it. My apartment was silent, save for the hum of the refrigerator and the aggressive clacking of my mechanical keyboard. I had traded the emotional turbulence of the dinner for the cold, hard certainty of data. I sat at my kitchen island, my laptop screen glowing like a tactical map in a war room, and initiated a complete forensic audit of the Lamberton family ledger. For years, I had treated my finances like a communal pot, tossing money in whenever a problem arose to keep the peace. I had been willfully blind, accepting vague explanations about inflation and bad luck. Tonight, the blindfold was off. I started with the American Express Platinum card. I had added my mother, Beverly, as an authorized user 3 years ago. The logic at the time had been sound, or so I thought. She had a minor health scare, and I wanted her to have a payment method for urgent copays or prescriptions if I was stuck in a meeting. I navigated to the transaction history and filtered by her card number for the last 12 months. The screen was populated with a list so long it took 10 seconds to load. I stared at the merchant names, feeling a cold numbness spread through my chest. There were no pharmacies. There were no urgent care clinics. Instead, I saw charges for Serenity Spa dating back 8 months, occurring bi-weekly like clockwork. $300 here, $400 there. I scrolled down. A boutique named Velvet Vine appeared 7 times in the last month alone, with totals averaging $600 per visit. Then I saw the charge from tonight, the Golden Heron, $3,850. I paused. They had used my card to pay for the dinner where they mocked me. They had literally swiped my name through the machine to celebrate a vacation I was excluded from. It was a level of audacity that bordered on art. I opened a new tab and logged into my Uber business account. I rarely used it personally, preferring to drive, but I kept it active for client visits. I navigated to the ride history. It was a catalog of Madison's social life, pick up yoga district, drop off the Aviary cocktail bar, pick up downtown, drop off Mark's apartment. Mark was her fiancé. I had been paying for her to commute to her lover's house for 6 months. The total for the year was over $4,000. I remembered Madison complaining last Thanksgiving about how expensive gas was, all while she was being chauffeured around Chicago in an Uber Black on my dime. I moved on to the utilities. I cross-referenced my credit report, which I usually only skimmed. There was a hard inquiry from a cable provider I did not use. I drilled down into the details. My father, Arthur, had opened a premium sports and entertainment package using my social security number and my maiden name. The billing address was their house, but the liability was mine. The account was currently 2 months past due. He was ruining my credit score to watch golf in high definition. I sat back, the blue light washing over my face. The emotion I felt wasn't sadness. It wasn't even anger, really. It was the sickening clarity of a diagnosis. I was not their daughter. I was not a sister. I was a resource. I was a living, breathing credit line that they could tap whenever their delusions of grandeur outpaced their reality. They did not love me. They harvested me. My finger hovered over the freeze card button on the banking site. It would be so easy. One click, and the music would stop. Their cards would decline. The cable would cut off, and Madison would be stranded on a curb. But that was too fast. It was too merciful. If I cut them off now, they would play the victim. They would cry about misunderstandings and technical glitches. They would gaslight me into believing I was the crazy one. No, I needed them to commit. I needed them to extend themselves so far over the edge that when the fall came, there would be no safety net to catch them. I withdrew my hand from the mouse. Instead of canceling, I went to the alert settings. I configured the system to send a push notification to my phone for every single transaction over $1. I wanted to see every coffee, every tip, every selfish indulgence in real time. I wanted a front row seat to their greed. My phone buzzed on the counter. It was a notification from the family group chat. I had muted it months ago. But I hadn't left. I picked up the phone and opened the thread. They were still awake, high on the adrenaline of their upcoming European adventure. Links to villas in Tuscany were flooding the chat. Look at this one Beverly had posted. It has a private vineyard and a chef on call. Book it, Arthur replied. We only live once. I watched the timestamp. It was 2 a.m. They were planning to spend $20,000 on a rental while their mortgage was likely being paid by the check I sent last week. Then, a message popped up from Madison. It was a reply to Beverly, but she must have been too tired or too drunk to realize she was still in the main group chat. Or perhaps she simply didn't care because I never responded anyway. Mom, are you sure we should book the deluxe suite? It is $5,000 a week. Does Hope's card even have that kind of limit? I held my breath. This was it. This was the smoking gun. They weren't just assuming I would pay. They were actively strategizing around my financial constraints. A moment later, Beverly's reply appeared. Don't worry about it. Honey, she never checks the statements. She is too busy working. Just swipe it. If it goes through, it goes through. I stared at the screen. She never checks. Just swipe it. They were banking on my apathy. They were banking on the fact that I was so desperate for their approval, or perhaps so beaten down by my workload, that I would simply absorb the cost like a business expense. I did not reply. I did not type a furious paragraph calling them thieves. Instead, I pressed the side buttons on my phone and took a screenshot. The flash on the screen was the only acknowledgement I gave. I saved the image to a secure folder on my cloud drive named The Lamberton Evidence. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the sleeping city. The notifications were already starting to trickle in from the banking app as they began placing deposits. Transaction approved Tuscan Luxury Escapes, $500. Transaction approved Delta Airlines, $300. Let them book it, I thought. Let them book the flights. Let them reserve the villas. Let them taste the olive oil and feel the Italian sun on their faces in their minds. I went back to the laptop and closed the lid. The darkness returned to the room, but my path forward was illuminated clearly. I was going to let them build a castle in the sky, and then, right when they were ready to move in, I was going to disintegrate the foundation. I walked to my bedroom, feeling lighter than I had in years. The audit was complete, the verdict was guilty, and the sentence would be carried out in 7 days. The week that followed the dinner was a masterclass in compartmentalization. I went to work at Vertex Horizon every day at 7 a.m, dressed in my crisp charcoal suits, and managed the flow of international freight with my usual ruthless efficiency. I sat in meetings, nodded at projections, and drank the break room coffee, all while a countdown clock ticked silently in the back of my mind. My phone was a constant source of vibration on my desk, buzzing with the manic energy of the Lamberton family group chat. I never opened it, but the previews flashed on my lock screen like news tickers from a foreign war. They were discussing swimwear. They were arguing over which Michelin-starred restaurant to book for their second night in Florence. They were sending links to vintage wine tours that cost more per person than my first car. They were so confident, so utterly assured of their reality. that they didn't even notice I hadn't typed a single word in 7 days. They interpreted my silence as compliance. To them, I was just the silent engine beneath the hood of their car, unseen and unappreciated, but essential for forward motion. Tuesday arrived with the gray, oppressive sky that Chicago is famous for. I sat at my desk, surrounded by dual monitors displaying shipping routes across the Atlantic. The office was quiet, save for the hum of the ventilation system and the distant murmur of sales calls. At exactly 10 in the morning, my phone lit up. It was not a text message. It was not an email. It was the crimson alert of my banking application, a push notification designed to arrest the heart. I picked up the device. My hand was steady, but my pulse hammered against my wrist bone. I unlocked the screen and stared at the notification that hovered there, stark and terrifying in its magnitude. Transaction request. $14,500. Merchant Tuscan, Luxury Escapes. Status, pending authorization. I stared at the number. $14,500. For a moment, the sheer weight of the figure took my breath away. That was not a vacation rental. That was a down payment on a house. That was 4 months of salary for the average American. That was the price of a small car. They were not just planning to visit Italy. They were planning to live like exiled royalty. And they expected me to foot the bill without a second thought. They believed my financial neck was so thick it could support the yoke of their extravagance forever. I could picture them right now. Beverly was probably holding the phone, her nails perfectly manicured, sipping a mimosa, waiting for the approved screen so she could scream with delight. Arthur was likely standing next to her, patting her on the back, congratulating himself on raising a daughter useful enough to exploit. I opened the banking app. The pending transactions sat at the top of the list, a blinking cursor demanding a response. Below it were 2 options, approve and decline. If I pressed decline, the merchant would simply try again, or worse, my mother would call me in 5 minutes, screeching about a glitch and demanding I call the bank to authorize the charge. A decline was a hurdle. It was not a wall. I did not want a hurdle. I wanted a dead end. I navigated away from the quick response screen and went deeper into the account settings. I found the tab labeled Card Management. My thumb hovered over the image of the platinum card, the plastic rectangle that had been the source of their power and my misery. I selected more options. Then I saw it, the option that would burn the bridge so thoroughly that not even ashes would remain. Report lost or stolen. I took a sip of my cold coffee. I looked out the window at the Chicago skyline. Then, with a calm, deliberate motion, I tapped the screen. The app prompted me for confirmation. Are you sure this will immediately deactivate your current card number and reject all pending transactions? I pressed yes. Almost instantly, my office phone rang. It was the Fraud Protection Department. I had been a client for 10 years. Their response time was impeccable. Ms. Lamberton, the voice on the other end said, professional and urgent. We received a report that your card ending in 4098 has been compromised. We are seeing a very large attempt from a travel agency in Italy. Was this you? I leaned back in my ergonomic chair, spinning it slightly from side to side. No, I said, my voice clear and unwavering. That was not me. I am currently at my desk in Chicago. My card is right here in my wallet. I see, the agent said, the clicking of a keyboard audible in the background. That is very concerning. The amount is $14,500. I did not authorize that, I repeated. I believe my card information has been stolen. I need you to lock everything down. Understood. I am declining the transaction from Tuscan Luxury Escapes immediately. I am also placing a hard block on the account number. Thank you, I said. Then I added the final nail in the coffin. Also, there are authorized users on this account, Arthur and Beverly Lamberton. I need those cards canceled as well. I believe their information might have been the source of the leak. It is too risky to keep them active. Absolutely. Ms. Lamberton, safety first. I am removing all authorized users and canceling their physical cards effective immediately. No further charges will be approved on any card associated with this account. Thank you, I said again. You have been very helpful. We will overnight a new card to your home address, the agent said. Is there anything else? No, that will be all. I hung up. The silence that returned to the room felt different now. It was heavier, pregnant with the impending explosion. Somewhere in the city, a credit card terminal was spitting out a receipt that said, declined. Somewhere. A travel agent was looking at my parents with an apologetic frown, but I was not done. I turned back to my computer screens. The bank was just heavy artillery. Now I needed to deploy the snipers. I opened a new browser window and began the digital purge. First, Netflix. I logged in and went to the account settings. I saw the profiles: Hope, Mom, Dad, Madison, Cole. I deleted every profile except my own. Then I went to the security tab and clicked the button that said Sign out of all devices. Next was Amazon Prime. I removed the saved shipping addresses for my parents' house and Madison's apartment. I changed the password to a random string of 18 characters that I wrote down in my physical notebook. Sign out of all devices, then Uber. I removed the family profile completely. From now on, if Madison wanted to go to the aviary, she could walk. I went down the list like a grim reaper of convenience. Spotify family plan. Cancelled. Hulu passwords changed. The meal delivery service Cole used 3 times a week. Payment method removed. I was systematically stripping away the infrastructure of their lives. They had lived in a house built on my data and my dollars, and I was turning off the lights one room at a time. When the last password was changed, I closed the browser. I stood up and walked to the break room. I brewed a fresh pot of coffee, watching the dark liquid drip slowly into the carafe. It was 10:15 in the morning. The transaction had been declined. The cards were dead. The passwords were changed. I returned to my desk and sat down, wrapping my hands around the warm ceramic mug. I did not look at my cell phone. I turned it face down on the desk. The silence was absolute, but I knew it wouldn't last. The shockwave was traveling through the invisible wires of the city, racing toward me. I took a sip of coffee. It was bitter, but to me, it tasted like freedom. I was not afraid of the anger that was coming. I welcomed it. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one who was going to pay for it. I just sat there, waiting for the inevitable ringing of the phone that would signal the beginning of their end. Precisely 15 minutes after I hung up with the bank, the silence on my desk was shattered. It began with a single vibration, a small tremor against the mahogany surface, but it quickly escalated into a continuous, frantic buzzing that made my phone look like a trapped insect trying to escape a jar. I did not reach for it immediately. I took another sip of my coffee, savoring the warmth, and watched the screen light up. The caller ID flashed Mom, accompanied by a photo I had taken of her 3 years ago in a rare moment of genuine happiness, holding a glass of wine. It was ironic that the same vice was likely fueling her panic right now. I let it ring. Once, twice, 4 times. The call went to voicemail. 3 seconds later, a text message arrived. It was from Madison. I could almost hear her shrill voice screaming through the pixels. "What the hell are you doing with the card? We are at the travel agency and the transaction just got declined. I am dying of embarrassment here." "Fix it." I chuckled softly. The image of Madison, who likely had her designer handbag perched on the counter to assert dominance, now having to shrink back as the card reader flashed red, was deeply satisfying. Then, the heavy artillery arrived. Dad appeared on the screen. My father never called during work hours unless it was an emergency or he needed a wire transfer. He let it ring for the full duration, 30 seconds of persistent demand, before the voicemail system claimed him. I waited for the notification that a voicemail had been left. It appeared a moment later. I pressed the speakerphone button, keeping the volume low enough not to disturb the office, but loud enough for me to hear the performance. The recording began. My mother's voice started out sugary, the tone she used when she was trying to manipulate a salesperson or a waiter. "Hope, sweetheart, it is Mom. Listen, There is a silly little glitch with the platinum card. We are trying to pay the deposit for the villa, the one with the vineyard. Remember? And the machine is acting up. I need you to call the bank right now and tell them to authorize it. The travel agent is waiting. There was a pause in the recording. I could hear muffled whispering in the background, likely Arthur hissing at her to be more firm. Then, her voice changed. The sugar dissolved, revealing the vinegar underneath. Hope, are you there? Pick up the phone. The clerk is looking at me like I am a fraud. Do you have any idea how humiliating this is? We are the Lambertons. Our cards do not decline. Call me back instantly. The message ended with the sharp click of a disconnect. I picked up the phone. I did not call them back. Instead, I opened the family group chat. Lamberton Family Love, which had been dormant on my end for a week. The unread message counter was climbing rapidly. Mom, Hope. Pick up Madison. This is actually insane. People are looking at us. Dad. This is unacceptable behavior. Hope. Business matters should not affect family time. I scrolled past their panic. I opened my photo gallery and selected the screenshot I had taken earlier from the banking app. It was a crisp, clear image of the notification, transaction declined, card locked, due to suspected fraud. I hit send. Then, I typed a single sentence. I did not use capital letters. I did not use exclamation points. I simply wrote, "The trip is without me, so the wallet is too." I placed the phone back on the desk and watched the fallout. It was instantaneous. Mom, excuse me, Madison. Are you serious right now? You blocked the card, Dad. You ungrateful child. We raised you better than this. Unblock it immediately. We have already signed the preliminary papers, Mom. This is spiteful. Hope, pure spite. You are jealous because you have to work, and we get to enjoy ourselves. How can you be so selfish? This is our 30th anniversary. Do you want to ruin our marriage? I watched the bubbles appear and disappear as they typed, deleted, and retyped their venom. They were throwing everything at the wall: guilt, shame, anger, duty, trying to find the one button that would make me fold. But they had disconnected that button themselves 7 days ago at the Golden Heron. Madison, I literally just posted about this trip on Instagram. I cannot cancel it now. I will look like a loser, Dad. I commanded you to call the bank. I am your father. I felt a strange sense of detachment. These were not the words of a family in crisis. These were the shrieks of parasites realizing the host had developed an immune system. Then, a private message notification popped up at the top of the screen. It was from Cole. I raised an eyebrow. Cole usually stayed out of the crossfire, preferring to hide in his room and play video games until the dust settled. I opened the message. Hey, sis. Whoa. Big drama in the chat. Huh. Mom is literally throwing her purse at the wall right now. Crazy. I waited. I knew there was a but coming. Anyway, look, I know you are mad at them, and totally fair, but I am kind of in a jam. I owe some guys online for a skin pack I bought last week. It is only $500. Since you are saving all that money on the trip, maybe you could float me, I promise. I will pay you back when my crypto takes off. I stared at the screen in disbelief. The house was burning down. The foundation was crumbling, and my brother was asking for $500 for digital costumes. He truly believed that my anger was a weather event, something that happened to other people. While he remained safely under the umbrella of his own incompetence, he thought he was exempt. He thought the without me policy had fine print. I did not reply to him. I did not lecture him on responsibility. I simply tapped his name at the top of the screen, scrolled down to the bottom of the contact card, and pressed block caller. Then I went back to the group chat. The messages were still pouring in, now transitioning from demands to bargaining. Mom. Okay. Hope, we can upgrade your ticket. You can come for the second week. Just unlock the card. I pressed block on Beverly. Dad, I will speak to your boss. Do not think I won't. I pressed block on Arthur. Madison, you are ruining my life. I pressed block on Madison. The phone went silent. The vibrations stopped. The screen stayed dark. I looked at the device. For the first time in a decade, it was just a piece of glass and metal, not a leash. I stood up and gathered my things. It was only 11:30 in the morning, but I was done. I had cleared my schedule for the afternoon, delegating my tasks to a junior associate who was eager to prove himself. I walked out of the office, past the receptionist who gave me a confused look, and into the elevator. When I stepped out onto the street, the cold Chicago air hit my face, but it felt bracing rather than biting. I did not go home. I knew they might head there eventually, banging on my door like creditors. I needed a sanctuary, a place where the currency was silent and the only debts were overdue books. I drove 4 miles north to the Harold Washington Library. It was a massive, imposing structure that my family would never dream of entering. To them, a building full of free books was a waste of prime real estate. To me, it was a fortress. I found a corner table on the 9th floor, specifically in the winter garden area with its glass roof. I sat down and turned off my phone completely. I did not just silence it. I powered it down. The screen faded to black, severing the last digital thread connecting me to the chaos I had unleashed. I opened a book I had grabbed from a shelf at random, a history of the Roman Empire. I read about the fall of great dynasties, about hubris and greed, and how empires usually crumbled from within before they were ever conquered from without. Around me, students studied and old men read newspapers. No one knew who I was. No one wanted my credit card. No one expected me to fix their problems. I sat there for 4 hours, watching the light change through the glass ceiling. I imagined my parents at the travel agency, perhaps now frantically calling other relatives, trying to spin a story about a banking error while their own cards declined one by one. I imagined the drive home, the shouting match in the car, the accusations. For the first time in my life, the silence wasn't lonely. It was rich, it was expensive, and it was all mine. The streetlights were casting long, distorted shadows against the brick facade of my apartment building when I finally pulled my car into the secure underground garage. It was nearly 11 at night. I stayed at the library until closing, then drove aimlessly for another hour, listening to the hum of the engine and the silence of my disconnected phone. I knew, with the instinct of a hunted animal, that my sanctuary would be under siege. The Lambertons were not people who accepted a digital dismissal. They needed a physical stage for their drama. I took the service elevator up to the 12th floor, avoiding the main lobby where I suspected they might have been lurking earlier. I let myself into my apartment, the heavy deadbolt sliding home with a reassuring clunk. I did not turn on the lights. I dropped my bag on the floor, kicked off my heels, and walked straight to the wall-mounted monitor that controlled the new security system I had installed just yesterday. It was a high-definition video doorbell with two-way audio and motion sensors, a piece of technology I had bought on a whim of paranoia that was now proving to be a prophecy. The screen flickered to life. My heart did not race, but my stomach turned over slowly, like a heavy stone. They were there. The camera's fisheye lens distorted their features, making them look like grotesque caricatures of the people I had known my entire life. My father, Arthur, was standing closest to the lens. His face was a map of fury. His skin flushed a deep, unhealthy crimson that looked almost purple in the night vision mode. He was sweating, despite the chill in the hallway, his collar unbuttoned as if his rage was physically strangling him. Behind him stood Beverly. She was not shouting yet. She was leaning against the doorframe, her face buried in a handkerchief, her shoulders shaking with exaggerated sobs. It was a performance I had seen 1,000 times, usually deployed to get out of a speeding ticket or to guilt a manager into accepting an expired coupon. But every time she thought Arthur wasn't looking, she would lower the handkerchief and glare at the wood of my door with eyes that were dry and hard as flint. Madison was pacing back and forth in the background, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, tapping her foot with a manic rhythm. Then, the pounding started. Arthur raised a fist and hammered on my door. The sound echoed through my apartment, a dull, rhythmic booming that felt like a violation of the air itself. "Open this door!" Arthur bellowed. The microphone on the camera picked up the distortion in his voice, turning it into a static-filled roar. "I know you are in there. Hope I saw your car in the garage. Open up right now. I stood in the dark, bathed only in the pale blue light of the monitor. I watched them like specimens in a jar. Hope, Beverly screamed, dropping the handkerchief act instantly to join the assault. She stepped up to the camera, her face filling the frame until all I could see were her manicured eyebrows and wide, frantic eyes. You do not get to do this. You do not get to run away, open the door and fix this mess. You are being a coward. The noise was attracting attention. On the edge of the screen, I saw the door to apartment 12B open. Mrs. Gable, a retired librarian who valued silence above all else, peeked her head out, looking terrified. Arthur saw her. Immediately, his posture changed. He straightened his spine, smoothed his hair, and adopted the tone of a beleaguered patriarch dealing with a difficult child. I am so sorry to disturb you, ma'am, Arthur shouted, projecting his voice so the whole floor could hear. My daughter is inside. She is having a mental health crisis. She has locked herself in and is refusing to communicate. We are just trying to make sure she does not hurt herself. We are very worried parents. The lie was so smooth, so practiced. He was painting me as unstable to justify his aggression. He was weaponizing their concern to dismantle my boundaries. I felt a cold rage crystallize in my chest. He was not going to spin this narrative. Not tonight. Not ever again. I reached out and pressed the talk button on the intercom panel. I can hear you, I said. My voice came out of the small speaker on the doorbell outside. Tinny but clear. I saw them all jump. Arthur spun back toward the door, his eyes scanning for a crack, for a weakness. Hope, he shouted. Open this godforsaken door. Do you have any idea how much money we lost today because of your little stunt? The travel agent is threatening to sue us for the cancellation fees. That sounds like a personal financial problem. Arthur, I said, my voice steady and detached. It has nothing to do with me. It has everything to do with you, Madison shrieked, pushing past our father to scream into the camera. You embarrassed us. You blocked the cards. I had to call Mark and tell him we might not go. Do you know what that makes me look like a liar? You are just jealous because nobody wants to take you anywhere. Madison, step back, I said. All of you, listen closely. You are trespassing. You are disturbing the peace. I am looking at a timer on my watch. You have exactly 2 minutes to get back in the elevator and leave this building. Or what? Beverly hissed, her face contorted with a mixture of shock and malice. You are going to call the police on your own mother. After everything I have done for you, I gave you life. And I have spent the last 5 years paying for yours, I replied. The debt is settled. Beverly, 1 minute and 30 seconds. I am not leaving until you reactivate that card, Arthur roared. He lost his composure again, forgetting the neighbors. He drew his leg back and kicked the bottom of my door. The wood shuddered, and a loud thud reverberated through the hallway. That is destruction of property, I said. 1 minute. Open the door or I will break it down, Arthur threatened, raising his foot again. I wouldn't do that if I were you, I said. Just as Arthur prepared for a second kick, the elevator doors at the end of the hall slid open with a cheerful ding. 2 large men in dark uniforms stepped out. I had called the building security desk from my car the moment I entered the garage, informing them that I had aggressive individuals following me who might attempt to gain access to my floor. I had told them I feared for my safety. Excuse me, the lead guard barked, his voice booming down the hallway. Step away from the door now. Arthur froze, his legs still half raised. He turned to face the guards, his face draining of its angry color and turning a pale, sickly dough. Officers, Arthur stammered, his hands coming up in a placating gesture. This is a misunderstanding. We are family. We are just having a disagreement. We heard the kicking from the stairwell, sir, the guard said, resting his hand on his belt. He didn't unholster anything, but the threat was implicit. The resident of this unit has requested you be removed. You need to leave the premises immediately, or we will be calling the Chicago Police Department to press charges for attempted break-in. Break-in, Beverly gasped, clutching her pearls. "We are her parents." "That does not give you the right to kick down doors, ma'am," the guard said. Stepping closer, he was a foot taller than Arthur and infinitely more imposing. "The elevator is this way. Let's go." The humiliation was palpable. It radiated off them in waves. Madison looked like she wanted to dissolve into the carpet. Arthur looked deflated, a balloon pricked by the needle of authority. He looked at the camera one last time, mouthing the word, "ungrateful," before turning and shuffling toward the elevator. But Beverly did not shuffle. She stood her ground for one last second. She walked right up to the camera lens, so close that her breath fogged up the glass. She stared directly into it, knowing I was on the other side. Her eyes were not sad. They were not worried. They were burning with a cold, calculated hatred that I had never seen directed at me before. It was the look of a predator that had been wounded, not by a lion, but by a sheep it intended to eat. "You think you have won," she whispered, her voice low enough that the guards couldn't hear, but the microphone picked it up perfectly. "But you have no idea who you are playing with. You humiliated me tonight. Hope, and you are going to pay for it. I will make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of daughter you really are." "Ma'am," the guard barked. Beverly pulled back, straightened her coat, and turned on her heel. She walked down the hallway with her head held high, refusing to look at the neighbors who were now openly staring from their doorways. I watched them enter the elevator. The doors slid shut, cutting off the view of my family. I let out a breath I didn't know I had been holding. My hands were trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the adrenaline crash. I turned off the monitor. The apartment was quiet again, but the silence felt different now. It wasn't peaceful. It was the heavy, static-charged silence before a storm. Beverly's threat hung in the air. "I will make sure everyone knows." I knew my mother. I knew she wasn't talking about gossip at the country club. She was talking about a scorched earth campaign. She couldn't get my money anymore, so she was going to come for the only thing I had left, my reputation. I walked to the kitchen and poured a glass of water. My hand shook as I raised it to my lips. Let her try. I thought, she had weaponized guilt for 30 years. She was about to find out that I had weaponized the truth. The morning sun glinted off the glass facade of Vertex Horizon, promising a standard Wednesday of supply chain management and corporate strategy. However, the moment I stepped off the elevator onto the 24th floor, I knew the battlefield had shifted. The silence that greeted me was not the focused quiet of productivity. It was the hushed, darting-eye silence of a scandal. 2 junior analysts stopped talking the moment I walked past their cubicles. My administrative assistant, a usually cheerful woman named Sarah, looked at me with an expression that sat somewhere between pity and morbid curiosity. "Good morning, Sarah," I said, placing my bag on my desk. "Good morning, Ms. Lamberton," she replied, her voice tight. HR sent an email. They want a quick sync at 10, and you might want to check Facebook." I froze. I had not logged into Facebook in 3 years. It was a wasteland of political arguments and baby photos that I had no interest in. But if HR was involved, this wasn't just social media. It was professional sabotage. I sat down and opened the browser. I didn't even have to search. The algorithm, sensing the sudden spike in traffic involving my name, served it up on a silver platter. There, at the top of my feed, was a post from Beverly Lamberton. It had been posted at 6 a.m, likely after a sleepless night of seething rage. It was an essay, a sprawling, tear-stained manifesto entitled, "A Mother's Heartbreak." It is hard to type this through the tears. It began, "You raise them. You sacrifice your youth and your dreams for them, and you pray they grow up to be good people. But sometimes, money changes them. We were supposed to be celebrating 30 years of marriage in Italy, a dream trip for our family. Instead, we are sitting at home, heartbroken, because a certain family member who we have supported through everything decided to pull the rug out from under us out of pure spite. She has a high-flying job, a fancy apartment, and 0 heart. She abandoned her aging parents and her siblings when we needed her most. To have a child turn their back on you, it is a pain worse than death. It went on for 5 paragraphs. She didn't name me, but she didn't have to. She described my job, my coldness, and my unwillingness to share the blessings. The comments section was a firing squad. How awful, some people forget where they came from. Praying for you. Bev, shame on her. Is this the daughter who works at Vertex Horizon? I thought that company had better standards. That last comment was the smoking gun. It was from one of Beverly's Bridge Club friends, and she had tagged the official Vertex Horizon corporate page. My blood ran cold. This was not just venting. This was an attempt to destabilize my career. She knew she couldn't get my money directly, so she was trying to destroy the source of it. I leaned back in my chair. Most people would have panicked. They would have written a frantic, defensive status update screaming, "That is not true," or posted a crying selfie to garner sympathy. But I was not most people. I was a logistics expert. I dealt in facts, in hard data, and in paper trails. Beverly had made a fatal error. She had brought a story to a data fight. I opened a new folder on my desktop and named it Operation Transparency. I spent the next hour ignoring my emails. Instead, I compiled a document. It was not a letter, it was a financial dossier. I converted 5 years of bank statements into a single, easy-to-read PDF. I highlighted every transfer to Arthur, Beverly, Madison, and Cole. I color-coded the expenses, red for emergency loans that were never repaid, blue for lifestyle subsidies like spa treatments and designer clothes, green for basic living expenses like their mortgage payments, which I had covered 8 times in the last 2 years. I added screenshots. I included the text from Madison asking if my limit was high enough for the villa. I included the text from Beverly saying, "She never checks. Just swipe it." I included the breakdown of the $30,000 credit card debt I had paid off for them in 2023. The grand total at the bottom of the last page was staggering. Even to me, $212,450.63. That was the price of their love. I saved the file as The Truth About the Lamberton Family, PDF. Then, I went to work. I did not post it publicly to the world. That would look messy. I needed a surgical strike. I went to my email contact list and selected the family elders, the aunts, uncles, and godparents who actually held the power and the purse strings in the extended family. These were the people Beverly tried to impress. These were the people she lied to about Arthur's investments. I drafted a short email. Subject regarding the recent cancellation of the Italy trip. Dear Aunt Linda, Uncle Jerry, and family. I know there is a lot of confusion regarding Mom's recent post about me abandoning the family. I value our family reputation, so I wanted to clear up the finances privately before things get out of hand. Attached is a summary of the support I have provided over the last 5 years, totaling over $200,000. The reason I did not fund the Italy trip is explained on page 12, where you will see the messages planning to use my card without my consent. I love my parents, but I can no longer finance a lifestyle they cannot afford. I hope you understand. I hit send. Then, I turned back to Facebook. I could not leave the public post unanswered, especially with my company tagged. I wrote a comment directly under Beverly's weeping status. I did not use emoticons. I did not use capital letters for emphasis. Mom, I am sorry you feel this way. However, the $212,000 I have given you over the past 5 years suggests I have not exactly abandoned you. I have attached the receipts and the text messages where you admitted to planning to use my card without asking to the family email thread. So everyone has the full context. If anyone in the comments feels strongly that you deserve this vacation, I encourage them to send you the money directly. I am sure you will accept Venmo. I changed the privacy settings of my comment to ensure it was visible to friends of friends, meaning everyone who could see her post could see my reply. Then I waited. It took less than 10 minutes for the tide to turn. The notification bell started ringing, but this time, the tone of the comments had shifted violently. Aunt Linda was the first to strike. She commented under Beverly's post, Beverly. I am reading this email from Hope. Did you really spend $4,000 at a spa last month while telling me you couldn't afford to fix your boiler? Then a cousin chimed in. Wait. Hope paid off your car. You told us Arthur's business was booming. The bridge club friend who had tagged my company deleted her comment immediately. The narrative of the poor, abandoned parents disintegrated in real time. The image of the ungrateful daughter was replaced by the image of the ATM daughter who had finally had enough. The numbers were too specific, too overwhelming to argue with. You can argue about feelings. You cannot argue about a bank statement with a timestamp. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Beverly. Take it down. Take it down right now. You are humiliating us. I did not reply. I took a sip of my water and refreshed the page. The post was gone. Beverly had deleted the entire thread. The mother's heartbreak had vanished, scrubbed from the internet to stop the bleeding, but the damage was done. The extended family now knew the truth. The facade of wealth Arthur and Beverly had maintained for decades had been shattered by a single PDF file. I closed the browser tab. I looked up to see Sarah standing at the entrance of my cubicle again. She was looking at her phone, her eyes wide. She looked up at me, and this time, there was no pity in her gaze. There was only respect, bordering on fear. Everything okay, Ms. Lamberton? She asked. Everything is fine, Sarah, I said, opening my spreadsheet for the morning logistics meeting. Please tell HR I am ready for that sync. I think they will find that the issue has been resolved. I went back to work. I had not just defended myself, I had nuked their supply lines. They would not be able to borrow money from family members anymore. The bank of lies was closed. And as I typed in the tracking numbers for a shipment of steel going to Hamburg, I felt a profound sense of lightness. The truth was not just a shield, it was a sword, and I wielded it with surgical precision. The digital ceasefire I had purchased with my email blast lasted exactly 4 hours. I had assumed that shame would drive my parents underground, that the sheer weight of the evidence I had provided to the extended family would force them into a period of quiet reflection, or at least strategic retreat. I was wrong. I had underestimated the volatility of a narcissist who has been unmasked. When you strip a man like Arthur Lamberton of his reputation, he does not reflect, he attacks. It was 2 p.m. The office at Vertex Horizon was humming with the post-lunch rhythm of productivity. I was in the middle of a conference call with a supplier in Hamburg, discussing the tariff implications of a new steel shipment, when the landline on my desk began to blink. It was the internal emergency line from the front reception. I excused myself from the call and picked up the receiver. Ms. Lamberton. It was Jessica, the head receptionist. Her voice, usually polished and professional, was trembling. I am so sorry to disturb you, but there is a man here. He claims to be your father. He is causing a significant disturbance. What is he doing? Jessica, I asked, my hand tightening around the phone cord. He is shouting, ma'am. He is telling anyone who will listen that you embezzled his retirement fund. He is demanding to see the CEO. Security is trying to de-escalate, but he is getting aggressive. He says he won't leave until you come down and face him. I closed my eyes for a brief second. Embezzled his retirement fund. It was a lie so audacious, so completely inverted from reality, that it was almost impressive. He was trying to poison the well. He knew he couldn't win the facts, so he was trying to destroy my character in the one place where I still commanded respect. Do not let him up, I said, my voice dropping to a register of absolute calm. I am coming down, but Jessica, call Mr. Henderson in HR and ask him to meet me at the elevators, and tell the security chief I want a full video record of this. Yes, ma'am. I hung up. I did not run. I stood up, smoothed my blazer, and checked my reflection in the monitor. I looked competent. I looked strong. I walked to the elevator bank, where David Henderson, our Director of Human Resources, was already waiting. He looked concerned. Hope, he asked. Jessica said, my father is in the lobby attempting to damage my professional reputation because I cut him off financially. I said, cutting straight to the chase. I need a witness. David. I need you to see exactly who he is. David nodded, his expression hardening. Let's go. We rode the elevator down in silence. As the numbers counted down 10, 9, 8, I could hear the noise before the doors even opened. It wasn't just shouting. It was a theatrical performance of victimhood. The doors slid open. The lobby of Vertex Horizon was a cavernous space of glass and steel, designed to impress international clients. Now, it was a stage for Arthur Lamberton's meltdown. He was standing near the security turnstiles, his face a mottled red, his tie loosened. He was pointing a shaking finger at a young security guard. "She is a thief," Arthur bellowed, his voice echoing off the marble walls. "I raised her, I sacrificed everything for her, and she steals my money. She leaves her parents to starve while she sits up there in her ivory tower. I want to see her boss. I want justice." A small crowd of employees returning from lunch had gathered near the coffee stand, whispering and watching with wide eyes. I stepped out of the elevator. My heels clicked sharply on the floor. The sound cut through his tirade like a knife. "Arthur," I said. He spun around. When he saw me, his eyes bulged. For a moment, I didn't see my father. I saw a stranger, a desperate, cornered animal who realized the cage door was closing. "You!" he screamed. He lunged toward the turnstiles. "You ungrateful little witch! You think you can send emails to my brother? You think you can humiliate me?" "I sent fax, Arthur," I said, stopping 10 feet away from him, keeping the security barrier between us. "If the truth humiliates you, that is a reflection of your actions, not mine." "Liar," he shrieked. Tell them how you tricked us. Tell them how you manipulated the accounts." He was projecting so hard, it was pathetic. He was trying to rewrite history in front of an audience, hoping that if he screamed loud enough, his version would become the truth. "Sir," David Henderson stepped forward, his voice calm and authoritative. "I am the director of HR. You are trespassing on private property. You need to lower your voice." "I don't care who you are," Arthur spat. "I am her father. I have rights. I have—" Suddenly, Arthur scrambled over the turnstile. He moved with a manic energy I didn't know he possessed. He was rushing toward me, his hand raised high. It wasn't a fist. It was an open palm. He intended to slap me. He wanted to discipline me like a child in front of my peers. He wanted to reestablish the hierarchy of violence that he had used implicitly for years. I did not flinch. I did not step back. I looked him dead in the eye, but the blow never landed. 2 heavy hands clamped onto Arthur's shoulders. The head of security, a former Marine named Marcus, had moved with lightning speed. He yanked Arthur back, pinning his arms to his sides. Arthur thrashed, kicking out at the air, his dignity completely evaporating. "Let go of me!" Arthur screamed. "She needs to be taught a lesson." I took 1 step closer, invading his space now that he was restrained. I looked at the man who had raised me, the man who had claimed to love me while draining my bank account. "Mr. Arthur Lamberton," I said, my voice projecting clearly across the silent lobby. "This is a professional workplace. Your actions have just been recorded by 4 separate high-definition cameras. You just attempted to assault an employee in front of witnesses. That is not discipline. That is a felony." Arthur stopped thrashing. He looked at me, panting heavily. "Hope, I just wanted to talk." "No," I said. "You wanted to control, and that part of our life is over." "You are my daughter," he whimpered, trying to switch tactics to pity. "How can you do this?" "I am the senior logistics manager for this facility," I replied coldly. "And you are a security risk." Then, the heavy glass doors of the executive suite opened. My boss, Mr. Sterling, walked out. He was a man of few words, a terrifyingly efficient executive who tolerated 0 drama. He looked at Arthur, held by the guards. He looked at me, standing tall and composed. He walked over to us. He didn't look at Arthur. He looked at me. "Ms. Lamberton," Sterling said. "Are you all right?" "I am fine, sir," I said. "I apologize for the disruption. This individual was just leaving." Sterling turned his gaze to Arthur. He looked at him with the same disinterest one might show a cockroach. We evaluate our people based on their metrics, their competence, and their value to this company, Sterling said, his voice like ice. Ms. Lamberton is one of our best. You, on the other hand, are a liability. If you ever set foot on this property again, I will not call security. I will call the district attorney, and I will have you prosecuted for harassment, assault, and slander. Do I make myself clear? Arthur opened his mouth, but no words came out. He looked from Sterling to me, realizing for the first time that his power didn't extend beyond the walls of his own house. Here, in the real world, he was nothing but a nuisance. Get him out of here, Sterling nodded to Marcus. Marcus and another guard dragged Arthur toward the revolving doors. He didn't fight them this time. He slumped, defeated, his shoes squeaking against the polished floor. As he was pushed out into the cold Chicago afternoon, he looked back at me one last time. There was no love in his eyes, only the hollow, terrified look of a man who realized his bank account was closed forever. The lobby was silent. Take 10 minutes. Hope, Sterling said quietly. Then get back to that Hamburg call. Yes, sir, I said. I watched Sterling walk away. I turned to David from HR. I need the footage, I said. And I need a statement from security. You will have it within the hour, David said, placing a hand on my shoulder. You handled that incredibly well. I took the elevator back up to the 24th floor. My hands were not shaking. My heart was not racing. I felt a strange, crystalline clarity. The incident in the lobby was the final severance. The biological tie had been cut at the dinner, but the social tie had been severed today. He had tried to break me in my sanctuary, and he had failed. I sat down at my desk. I did not go back to the Hamburg call immediately. Instead, I opened my personal email and composed a new message. I typed in the address of a family law attorney I had researched the night before, a woman known for her aggressive stance on harassment cases. Subject urgent. Request for restraining order representation. Dear Ms. Vance, my name is Hope Lamberton. I am writing to retain your services immediately. I require a restraining order against my parents, Arthur and Beverly Lamberton. I have evidence of financial abuse, digital harassment, and as of 20 minutes ago, attempted physical assault at my place of employment. I have video footage and witnesses. I want the most restrictive order the court will allow. I want zero contact. I want them to know that if they ever come near me again, they will go to jail. I hit send. I took a deep breath, inhaling the conditioned air of the office. It smelled of coffee and ozone. It smelled of safety. I picked up the phone and dialed the number for Hamburg. This is Hope Lamberton, I said into the receiver. Apologies for the delay. Let's discuss those steel tariffs. The days following the incident in the lobby were characterized by a silence that was not empty, but rather heavy with the noise of collapsing infrastructure. When you remove the load-bearing wall from a house built on sand, the roof does not just sag, it comes down with a thunderous crash. I watched from a distance as the Lamberton family facade, which had been carefully polished for 3 decades, disintegrated into a cloud of debt and recrimination. The cancellation of the Italy trip was not merely a disappointment, it was a financial catastrophe. I learned through the grapevine of gossiping relatives that Arthur had not just booked the trip on a whim, he had gambled on it. He had placed non-refundable deposits on the villas and the private tours using 3 different credit cards that were already nearing their limits. His plan had been simple and parasitic: use his cards to secure the bookings, and then, once we were in Tuscany, claim his cards were having international issues, and force me to put the remaining balance and likely the transfer of the initial debt onto my platinum card. Without my card to act as the safety net, the trapeze artist had fallen straight onto the concrete. The travel agency refused to refund the $10,000 in deposits. The airlines offered only travel vouchers, which were useless to a man who could barely afford gas to get to the airport. But the Italy trip was just the tip of the iceberg. The real damage was below the waterline. 2 days after the lobby incident, Madison went to her final fitting for her wedding dress. It was a designer gown, something she had picked out assuming that the family pot would cover it. I had stopped the automatic transfer to the joint household account the night of the dinner. When the bridal boutique attempted to cash the check for the final balance of $4,000, it bounced. I did not need to be there to imagine the scene. I could picture Madison standing on the pedestal, surrounded by mirrors, as the manager walked in with a grim face and a returned check. The humiliation would have been absolute. She had to leave the dress behind. Then came the creditors. It turned out that Arthur and Beverly had been running a Ponzi scheme with their own lives. They had been using the cash I gave them for groceries and repairs to pay the minimum interest on loans I didn't even know existed. They had a second mortgage. They had personal loans with predatory interest rates. As long as I kept injecting $5,000 a month into their veins, the patient stayed alive. Now that the transfusion had stopped, the organ failure was rapid. My phone rang on a Thursday evening. It was a number I did not recognize, so I picked it up, thinking it might be my lawyer. Hope, it was Beverly. Her voice was unrecognizable. The sharp, commanding tone she had used her entire life was gone. In its place was a thin, trembling whisper that sounded like a child waking up from a nightmare. "Hope, please," she sobbed. "You have to help us. They are in the driveway." I stood in my kitchen, holding a glass of Pinot Noir. "Who is in the driveway?" "Mother." "The repo men," she cried. "They are hooking up the Range Rover. Your father is out there trying to stop them, but they pushed him away. Hope, the neighbors are watching, Mrs. Higgins is filming it on her phone. Please, just transfer $2,000. That is all they need to unhook it. I will pay you back. I swear." I took a sip of wine. I felt a momentary tug in my chest, the conditioned reflex of a daughter trained to fix things. I heard the panic in her voice, the genuine terror of a woman whose identity was entirely wrapped up in material possessions being stripped of her armor. But then, the memory washed over me. I saw the candlelight at the Golden Heron. I saw the smirk on Arthur's face. I heard the laughter when they said I was too boring for Italy. You are better suited to staying home and making money. The tug in my chest vanished, replaced by the cold steel of resolve. "Mom," I said, my voice soft but unyielding. "Yes." "Are you sending it?" she asked, a flicker of hope in her voice. "You told me the vacation was without me," I said. "You were very clear about that." "That was just a joke, we didn't mean it," she wailed. "It wasn't a joke," I said. "And neither is this. You said the trip was without me. Well, Mom, your life from now on is without me too. The car, the house, the debts, they are all without me. Hope, you can't—" "Goodbye, Beverly." I hung up. Then, I blocked that number too. I did not sit down and cry. I sat down and opened my email. I had one final piece of business to conclude. The next morning, a courier arrived at the Lamberton residence. He stepped over the tire marks where the Range Rover had been dragged away and handed Arthur a thick envelope from the law firm of Vance Associates. Inside was not an offer of reconciliation. It was a formal demand letter. The year prior, in a moment of weakness, I had loaned my parents $50,000 to invest in a business opportunity Arthur claimed was a sure thing. I knew it was likely a scam, but I had made them sign a handwritten promissory note, mostly to stop Arthur from asking for more. They had signed it with a laugh, calling me formal and uptight, convinced I would never enforce it. They were wrong. The letter demanded the immediate repayment of the principal sum of $50,000, plus interest, within 30 days. It attached a copy of the signed note. It stated clearly that if payment was not received, we would proceed with a lawsuit to place a lien on their remaining assets. It was the final nail in the coffin. The reaction was immediate implosion. Without a common enemy they could exploit, the Lambertons turned on each other. I heard from a cousin that the house had become a war zone. Arthur blamed Beverly for her spending habits, screaming that her spa days had ruined them. Beverly screamed back that Arthur's failed business ventures and laziness were the real cause. Madison, furious about her lost wedding dress and the cancellation of her allowance, blamed both of them for being losers who had tricked her into thinking they were rich. Cole, the parasite who had asked me for gaming money, apparently packed a bag and fled to a friend's couch the moment the internet was cut off for non-payment. The collapse was total. They were not a family. They were a group of people held together by a shared line of credit, and I had cut the card. A week later, I drove past their neighborhood. I didn't turn down their street. But I didn't have to. I saw the Zillow listing online. The house, the sprawling, 4-bedroom colonial that Arthur had bragged about for 20 years, was not technically for sale yet. But there was a public notice recorded in the county clerk's office which had been picked up by the real estate sites. Notice of default. They were 90 days behind on the mortgage. The bank had started foreclosure proceedings. I sat in my car, looking at the digital image of the house on my phone screen. It looked grand in the photo, with its manicured lawn and imposing columns. But I knew the truth. The boiler was broken, the roof was leaking in the guest room, and the people inside were hollow shells, eating each other alive because there was no one left to feed them. I closed the browser app. I felt a profound sense of satisfaction. It wasn't happiness, exactly. It was the feeling of a mathematical equation finally balancing out. 0 = 0. I put my car in gear and drove toward the highway. I had a flight to catch. Not to Italy. I had booked a ticket to somewhere much colder, somewhere clean and vast, where the air didn't smell like deception. The Lamberton Empire had fallen, and I hadn't even had to push it. I just stepped out of the way and let gravity do its work. The date on my digital calendar marked what should have been the first day of the Lamberton family anniversary tour. According to the original itinerary, I was supposed to be in a cramped economy seat flying over the Atlantic, dreading the moment we landed in Rome where I would inevitably be handed the bill for a rental car I wasn't allowed to drive. Instead, I was breathing in air so cold and clean it felt like it was scrubbing my lungs from the inside out. I was not in Italy. I was in Fairbanks, Alaska, standing on the edge of a frozen world that felt a million miles away from the petty dramas of Chicago. I had requested 2 weeks of leave from Vertex Horizon, and for the first time in my career, I did not set an out-of-office auto-reply that included my personal cell number. I simply vanished. I had turned off my phone the moment the plane touched down. I tossed it into the bottom of my duffel bag, a dead brick of glass and anxiety that no longer held any power over me. In my hand, I held a heavy DSLR camera, a purchase I had made years ago but never had the time to use. My destination was a small, timber-framed lodge nestled deep in the wilderness, accessible only by a bush plane that rattled and hummed over endless carpets of pine and snow. There were no 5-star ratings here. There were no waiters in tuxedos. There was just a fireplace the size of a small car, a silence so profound it rang in my ears, and a group of strangers who had no idea that I was a logistics manager or a family bank account. On my second day, I joined a small group for a trek to a glacier. The guide was a weathered man named Elias, who spoke to the mountains as if they were old friends. Beside me hiked a retired schoolteacher from Ohio and a young couple from Germany. "Watch your step here," the teacher said, offering me a hand as we navigated a patch of blue ice. I took her hand. It was a simple, human gesture. There was no transaction involved. She didn't want anything from me. She just didn't want me to fall. We reached the face of the glacier, a wall of ancient ice that glowed with an impossible shade of sapphire. We stood there in reverence, the only sound the cracking of the ice and the wind whispering through the valley. "It makes you feel small, doesn't it?" the German woman whispered. "Yes," I replied. "It does." And it was true. Standing there, looking at ice that had existed for 10,000 years, the towering problems of Arthur and Beverly Lamberton shrank down to their proper size. They were microscopic. My anger, which had felt so consuming in the Vertex Horizon lobby, dissipated into the vastness of the landscape. I realized I had wasted my youth trying to buy a seat at a table where I was never welcome, starving myself to feed people who were bottomless pits of need. That evening, I sat by the communal fire in the lodge, The other guests were sharing stories, passing around a bottle of whiskey. I listened, laughing at jokes that were actually funny, feeling the warmth of genuine camaraderie. No one interrupted me. No one talked over me. No one looked at me and saw a credit limit. They just saw hope. Around midnight, the lodge manager tapped me on the shoulder and pointed to the window. "The lights are out," he said softly. I grabbed my coat and stepped out onto the deck. Above me, the sky was dancing. Great ribbons of green and violet curled across the darkness, moving with a silent, ghostly grace, the aurora borealis. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. I sat down on a wooden bench, wrapped in a wool blanket, and watched the show. Tears pricked my eyes, but they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of relief. I had a sudden, crystal-clear epiphany. I was not lonely. For the first time in 29 years, I was entirely, completely free. The emptiness I had feared was not empty at all. It was space. Space for me to grow. Space for me to breathe. Space for me to build a life that actually belonged to me. I went back to my room and pulled out a notebook. I didn't write a to-do list. I wrote a letter. Dear Hope, I am writing this to the 10-year-old version of you, the little girl who saved her lunch money to buy Dad a tie for his birthday, hoping he would look at you the way he looked at Madison. I am sorry. I am sorry I let you think that love was something you had to purchase. I am sorry I let you believe that your value was calculated in dollars and cents. You were always enough. You were always worthy. And from this day forward, I promise to protect you. I tore the page out and tossed it into the fireplace in the main hall. I watched the paper curl and blacken, the words turning into smoke that rose up the chimney and out into the Arctic night. While I was finding my soul in the snow, I knew the reality back in Chicago was far less poetic. Before I left, I had heard through the grapevine that the great Lamberton sell-off had begun. To pay off the immediate threats, the bounced checks, the utility bills, the repo fees my parents had been forced to cannibalize their own facade. The expensive golf clubs Arthur used to prop up his image at the country club were sold on an online marketplace. Beverly's collection of vintage designer handbags, which she used to sneer at her friends, was consigned to a reseller for pennies on the dollar. They were stripping the gold paint off their lives, revealing the rotting wood underneath. And for the first time, I felt no urge to rush in with a bucket of paint. On the final morning of my trip, I logged onto the lodge's satellite computer to check my flight status. There was one email in my inbox that caught my eye. It was from Ms. Vance, my attorney. Subject settlement agreement. Restraining order, update. Dear Ms. Lamberton, I hope this email finds you well. I have just concluded a meeting with your parents' legal representative, a public defender, as they claimed they could not afford private counsel. They have agreed to all terms. They will sign the permanent no-contact order. They accept that any violation will result in immediate arrest. In exchange, they have asked that you pause the civil lawsuit regarding the $50,000 promissory note. They claim they have no liquidity to pay it and are requesting a grace period of 2 years. If you agree to hold off on the lawsuit, they will disappear from your life effectively immediately. Please let me know how you wish to proceed. I sat there, looking at the screen. $50,000. It was a lot of money. A year ago. The thought of losing it would have kept me up at night. But sitting here, with the memory of the glacier fresh in my mind, the money felt like monopoly currency. The money was the final tether. If I sued them, I would have to see them in court. I would have to think about them. I would have to engage with them. I didn't want the money. I wanted the silence. I didn't even type a reply to the lawyer. I knew she would understand my lack of response as a tacit approval to proceed with the paperwork. I simply moved the mouse, clicked the trash icon, and deleted the email. I closed the browser. I walked out of the lodge and climbed into the small plane that would take me back to civilization. As the engine roared to life and we lifted off the snowy runway, I didn't look back. The Lamberton Family was a closed chapter, a book I had finished reading and left on a shelf in a burning house. I turned my face toward the window, watching the sun rise over the mountains, painting the world in shades of gold and fire. I was going home, but for the first time, I was going to a home that was truly mine. Returning to Chicago felt less like coming home and more like entering a new atmosphere where the gravity had shifted. The city was the same gray, windswept metropolis of steel and glass, but I was different. The woman who had left for Alaska was a fractured collection of obligations and guilts. The woman who returned was a fortress. My first stop was not my apartment, but a security firm. I did not just change the locks. I upgraded the entire perimeter. I had the tumblers replaced with high-security cylinders that could not be picked. I changed my phone number, giving the new digits only to my employer and 3 close friends. I even began browsing listings for a new building entirely, one with a 24-hour doorman and a reputation for turning away unwanted visitors. I was scrubbing my digital and physical footprint, erasing the trails that the Lamberton parasites had used to track me for decades. Information, however, has a way of finding you even when you stop looking for it. 2 weeks after I returned, I received a text from a cousin I was still on good terms with. She didn't want money, she just wanted to gossip. The news was grim, but it read like justice. Madison's wedding had been postponed indefinitely. Without my financial backing, the venue had canceled their reservation, and apparently, the fiancé was not keen on marrying into a family that was actively imploding under the weight of debt. The big house, the colonial mansion that Arthur used to define his self-worth, was officially on the market. They were downsizing. The cousin mentioned something about a rental in a far-flung suburb, a place where the houses were small and the commute was long. It was the kind of neighborhood my mother used to make fun of while driving past in her leased Range Rover. Now, it was her reality. I deleted the text without replying. Knowing was enough. I did not need to gloat. The final attempt at contact came on a Tuesday, slipping through the cracks of my defensive wall via my work email address, the one channel I could not completely block. The subject line read, "Emergency, Dad in hospital." My finger hovered over the mouse. For a split second, the old conditioning kicked in. The panic, the dutiful daughter reflex that I needed to drop everything and rush to his side. The email was from Beverly, sent from a new address I hadn't blocked yet. "Hope, please, read it. Dad collapsed. High blood pressure. Doctors are worried it is a stroke. He is asking for you. We are at Mercy General. Please come. We can put everything behind us. He just wants to see his little girl." My heart hammered against my ribs. I stared at the screen. A stroke collapsed. I picked up my desk phone. I did not call Beverly. I called the main switchboard of Mercy General Hospital. "I am calling to check on a patient admitted today." I told the operator. "Arthur Lamberton." There was a pause, the sound of typing, and then the operator returned. "Yes, Mr. Lamberton is here. He is currently in the outpatient cardiology clinic, waiting for a routine stress test. He is not admitted, ma'am. He is scheduled to be discharged in an hour." "Is he in critical condition?" I asked, my voice flat. "No, ma'am. His vitals are stable. It looks like a standard checkup." I hung up the phone. The receiver clicked into the cradle with a sound of finality. It was a lie. It was a trap designed to lure me back into the room so they could guilt me into paying the hospital bill or co-signing a loan. They had weaponized his health, exaggerated a checkup into a deathbed scenario, just to get access to my wallet one last time. That lie extinguished the last flickering ember of pity I held for them. If they were willing to fake a medical crisis to manipulate me, they were not parents. They were predators. I opened the email client. I did not reply. I right-clicked on the sender address and selected Block Domain. Then I went to IT and requested that any external emails containing the name Lamberton be automatically routed to the spam folder. 6 months passed. The seasons changed. The snow melted, and the city bloomed into spring. My life bloomed with it, without the draining influence of my family. My energy at work skyrocketed. I was promoted to Director of North American Logistics at Vertex Horizon, a position that came with a corner office and a salary that would have made Arthur weep with envy. I used that salary to buy a home, not a mansion to impress neighbors I didn't like, but a condo in a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood. It was small, warm, and filled with light. The deed had exactly one name on it, Hope Lamberton. Thanksgiving arrived. A day that used to fill me with dread. In the past, Thanksgiving meant cooking for 12 hours while Beverly criticized the turkey and Arthur complained about the wine. It meant writing checks under the table to keep the peace. This year, my apartment smelled of roasted garlic and rosemary. I was not alone, but I was not with my family. I had organized a Friendsgiving. Around my table sat Sarah from the office, the woman who had warned me about the Facebook post. Next to her was the librarian I had met during my days of hiding. There was my lawyer, Ms. Vance, who had become a mentor. There was no tension. There were no passive-aggressive comments about my weight or my job. There was only the sound of clinking glasses and genuine, raucous laughter. I stood up to make a toast. I looked at these people who owed me nothing, and to whom I owed nothing but friendship. "To freedom," I said, raising my glass of Pinot Noir. "To freedom," they cheered, raising their glasses in unison. I walked over to the window as the conversation turned to movies and books. Outside, the first snow of the season was beginning to fall, dusting the Chicago streets in white. I looked at the reflection of the room in the glass, the warm light, the happy faces, the peace. I thought about the rental house in the suburbs where my parents were likely sitting, perhaps arguing over a store-bought turkey, blaming the world for their misfortune. I remembered my mother's voice in the restaurant, sharp and cruel, saying, "The trip is without you. Hope." I took a sip of wine. The liquid was rich and complex, tasting of dark cherries and oak. "You were right, Mom," I whispered to the reflection in the glass. "The trip was without me, and my beautiful, quiet, successful life is without you too." I drank the rest of the wine, feeling the warmth spread through my chest. The shackles were gone, the debt was paid. I turned back to my friends, smiling as the screen faded to black. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please drop a comment below with your city or country, and let's share our thoughts on dealing with toxic family members. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Veronica Revenge Stories. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this video get recommended to more people who might need to hear it.